My name is John Griffin, and I'm a member of the Rochford Group here at the Naval War College. A few weeks ago, I was at a conference and we were talking about how do you integrate cyber into the professional military education system. And one of the challenges that we had was everyone wanted to throw every conversation into this pot we call cyber hyphen. And we would jump from the strategic level to the tactical level to the operational level, back to tactical, up to strategic, all in the same conversation. We would have conversations about policy, technical, AI, machine learning, SCADA systems, election fraud, all in the same conversation. The problem was we didn't know how to organize our thoughts. And so everything just kept getting dumped into this cyber pot. So me being the token Marine at the conference, sitting in the background playing with my crayons, it dawned on me that we need to just add framework and we need to add structure. And a lot of these structures and frameworks already exist. We just need to learn to take advantage of it to have a more rigorous conversation about cyber. So what I would suggest is we have to start at the beginning. And when I talk about the beginning, I mean the very beginning. So there once was this caveman. We'll call him caveman number 1. And he was happy. He had a nice cave, had fire, he had meat, vegetables, fruit, right? Life was good. Until one day, another caveman comes along. We'll call him caveman number 2. And he saw everything that caveman 1 had, and he was jealous. So, of course, caveman 1 defended himself. And they fought every day over limited resources. And this was characterized the nature of warfare for many years to come. Till one day, caveman 2 picks up a rock. And he hits caveman 1 with the rock. And caveman 1 was like, ow, that really hurt. What am I supposed to do about that? He's got a rock. Right? Until caveman 1 does his research and does his experimentation, eventually he learns how to fight with a rock. Now they both have rocks, and they fight every day with these rocks, and this kind of rock warfare characterized the nature of warfare for many years to come. Until one day, caveman 1 picks up a big stick, uses it as a club, and he hits caveman number 2 with the stick. And caveman 2 was like, ow, that really hurt. What am I supposed to do about that? And he's now got a club. He's got standoff. Right, until caveman 2 does his research and experimentation. Eventually, he learns how to fight with a stick and a club as well. And rocks and sticks characterize the nature of warfare for many years to come. And what they realize is the only thing that they actually have in common is that they would both reflect nostalgically and wish that all they could do was just fight. Because that was a lot simpler. This is rock and club warfare is really hard. And my point is, in today's cyber hyphen conversations, it's not hard. This is just our time to kind of figure out the nature of warfare and how cyber affects it. And those frameworks and those structures already exist to have these conversations. So going back to our caveman example, the cavemen eventually invited their friends, their tribes, their villages, right, built armies, nations, and the land domain was the nature of warfare for many years to come. Until one day, a couple of smart guys look out over the ocean and they're like, wow, look at all that big, beautiful water. I wonder if we put our warriors and weapons onto a ship, if we can use the water for maneuver space and gain an advantage over the land armies. The land army guys said, that's stupid. That'll never work. But the smart, goofy-looking guys stuck with it, and eventually we accepted that the maritime domain is a second domain of warfare. And this was generally accepted for the next couple of thousand years. Until one day, a couple of brothers from Ohio are out in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and they invent this flying machine. And a couple of smart, goofy-looking guys look at the flying machine and say, hey, I wonder if we can use those to attack battleships. The Navy guy says, that's stupid. That'll never work. But these smart, goofy-looking guys, they stick with it. And eventually, 20, 30 years later, the aircraft carrier becomes the Pearl of the Pacific. And over the European theater in World War II, the Army Air Corps dominates in the air. And we eventually have an air domain, and we accept that there are 3 domains now in warfare. Right? But in World War II, something else happened. Right? We enter the atomic age. Now, as Cold War warriors, we like to walk around and thump our chest and talk about how we won it and how life was simpler in the Cold War. Right? But that's a little bit of revisionist history. Because in 1945, we were the only nation with an atomic weapon. It wasn't until 1949 does Russia detonate their first atomic weapon. Right? And it's not until 1959 Do we broadly accept that deterrence is a legitimate academic theory, right, applicable to the national strategy and defense, right? And it's in 1959 we finally also accept this concept of mutually assured destruction. But I would suggest in those 15 years, we had a lot of smart people trying to figure out how to deal with atomic warfare and how it changed the nature of warfare. And that's an entire thought generation that somehow we just kind of stumbled upon it. Now let's fast forward through Vietnam. In 1980, we have the failed rescue attempt in the Iranian desert, Operation Eagle Claw. In 1983, we have the invasion of Grenada, where the preponderance of the casualties came out of the Special Operation Forces. Right? And it wasn't until 1986, now Congress had to legislate SOCOM into existence. But it's really not until the events and operations that followed 9/11 do we figure out how to fully integrate the conventional forces and the Special Operation Forces. Today we think it's easy, right? But back then, it wasn't so much. And if you look again, this represents another thought generation, a bunch of smart people getting together and trying to figure this out. And we finally stumble upon the answer. So I offer you this. In 2018, we finally elevated CyberCom to be a functional combatant command. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to wait another 15 years, another thought generation to expire, and hope that we stumble into this answer. What I want to do is I want to think about how do we expedite that, and how do we make that timeline move more quickly. And this is what I would suggest. So we go back to thinking about domain warfare, right? For thousands of years, we accepted that the land and the maritime domains were the domains of warfare. For the past 100 or so years, we've added a third, and we've accepted the air domain as a domain of warfare. But now, recently, we're talking about adding 3 more domains: space, cyber, and the electromagnetic spectrum. Is that right? I don't know. Is this 3 new domains? Is this 1 domain? Maybe. Maybe there's a smart contractor out there who will publish on this and earn a couple $1 million, or some field-grade officer will get a cool ribbon. Maybe they'll call it SCEM or CHEMS or equal MC squared. I don't know. But what I would suggest is this is a framework that we should consider. And if your thing is multi-domain warfare, then focus here and stay here. Don't worry about everything else. Right? Let's just get smart people in a room, running exercises, publishing about domain warfare. And let's just stay here in this framework and figure it out, because it's a framework that already exists. And we can have intelligent conversations about it without trying to answer every other question. So now, go back to the conference. We were talking about how do you integrate cyber into the professional military educational system. And I would offer this structure already exists to have these conversations. If you're here, you're at the entry level for training and education. You're generally training people at the tactical level of warfare. Okay? This is where we're teaching people how to fix and fly airplanes, right? Tanks, ships. We'll get some guys out there walking around with heavy stuff on their back, right? Whatever it may be, you're at the tactical level, the entry level. So when it comes to cyber, right, figure out what needs to happen at the entry level for your students. Do I know that answer? No. But I guarantee there's directors of schools and their instructors, right, who understand what the needs are at the tactical level for their students. Don't wait for the answer is my point. Begin to experiment. Begin to fail and learn and publish your results and let us know. Right? What is it at the tactical level that we need to know? Do we need to know how to code? I don't know. Do they just need to learn that cyberspace undergirds virtually everything that's out there? Maybe. Do they need to learn that all their actions in the tactical level of warfare has an effect on the information environment? Maybe. But the only way we're going to do this is if we experiment. And with experimentation comes failure, but with failure comes learning. And once we learn, we start to publish results. But don't wait for someone to tell you to act. Act now. Next, within our PME system, we have the intermediate level education. We'll come back to that. Next, we have our senior level of education. That's not a very good drawing, but it's supposed to be the Capitol building, because I consider our 06s kind of like our senators. So these folks are in charge of the institution. Right? Education at that level teaches them how to run the institution, right? The rules, the regulations, the policies, right? They're at the operational level. They're also helping inform at the strategic level. So what do they need to know about cyber? I don't know. But I guarantee the directors and professors and instructors at that school can have these conversations and think about what's necessary for men and women at that point in their career to make a decision on what they need to learn about cyber. But don't wait. Don't wait for everyone else to tell you what needs to happen. Don't worry what's happening in every other schoolhouse or in the environment. Focus on your level of education, and let's begin to have these discussions. Experiment, fail, and learn. And up top, of course, and we talk about general officers. When we talk about general officers, we often talk about man, train, and equip. We often talk about acquisitions and futures. We talk about fighting the wars, the O plans. This is all their level. Great. So what do they need to know about cyber? I don't know. But again, I guarantee education at that level, right? People out there know it, and let's just figure it out. Don't try to find all the solutions. Don't try to solve everyone's problems. But what do these folks need to know at their level? Now, one of the things we talk about is we like case studies. And for many years, we used Vietnam as a case study. Now, what I would suggest is we don't have a lot of cyber case studies out there. Right now, maybe Ukraine is a good one. Is that the best one? I don't know. But I think it can work. It's a starting point. I'm not afraid to try it. But when we use case studies in our PME system, right, we don't train privates on thinking through the decision-making of Secretary McNamara back in Vietnam. No, we teach privates and ensigns, right, and lieutenants how to patrol villages, how to lay tactical wire, right? So what at the cyber level do tactical folks need to know, right? And at the same time, at these levels, what's appropriate for them to study about the operations in the Ukraine? Do these guys and men and women need to know how to code? I don't know. That seems kind of tactical to me. Maybe they should understand how to run the institution and fight hybrid warfare and understand why Putin is demonstrating some expansion into the Ukraine. Maybe that makes more sense. I don't know, though, but I guarantee we got people within this organization who can figure this out, and I think we should. So now back to the intermediate level of education, right? This is where we bring together officers from across all the services, right? Mid-grade officers to understand how to fight and plan at the operational level of warfare. And typically the lexicon that we use within the operational level of warfare, we talk about the principles of joint operations. We talk about operational factors of time, space, and force. And then we talk about operational joint functions, right? That's command and control, it's intel, it's movement and maneuver, it's fires, sustainment, it's protection. And all the joint functions are associated capabilities and activities that if you synchronize, it creates synergy and effectiveness within the force. And the nation that can do this best will win at the operational level of warfare. Right? Last year, the Secretary of Defense said information is the seventh joint function, and that threw everyone into a tizzy. Some services have come to accept it. Some services are digging in and denying it. Is it a seventh joint function? I don't know. But if you're at the operational level of warfare, this becomes another framework in which you can study, research, learn, experiment, fail, and share your results. But stay here. Don't worry about everything else. Don't try to solve everyone else's problems. If we think about the planning paradigm, we tell planners to take risks and understand what those associated consequences of the risk decision is. We tell planners to make assumptions so you can continue to plan. We'll make some assumptions until they're validated and continue to study how do we integrate cyber at the operational level of warfare. Because we are out there fighting, and right now we have a phasing model, right? We consider there are 5 phases, which is always odd because there are 6 phases, but that's a conversation for another day. Right? And we debate whether we're at phase 1, phase 2, phase 0, right? Some people argue if this is even the right construct. I don't know, is it? Some say that it's not applicable at the strategic level. I don't know, but I know there are people out there who are studying it. I know there are people who are looking at it, and this to me becomes another framework which we can study, right? Does this make us redefine how we look at operational prep of the environment? What does that actually mean? Does that mean you're in phase 0 or phase 2? The cyber forces would tell you they're out here and they're fighting. So does that model make sense for us? I don't know, but it's another structure we can look at. And here's a cyber model we all tend to agree with at the moment. And we talk about having blue, gray, and red space. And all four forces are working together in here. We generally describe this area as the doden. And when they want to take some other actions against our adversaries and enemies, right, they go into the gray space and do DCO operations. And occasionally, when they want to go deeper and defend forward, right, all the forces operate out here in the red space, called offensive cyber. But everyone's like, oh, this is so hard, right? Because in this environment also, right, our foreigners, right, multinational corporations, it's really cluttering up the space. And on our side, we have all our education and academia. You have the private sector. It's so hard, right? Is it? I don't know. This to me looks like another framework. And if we just talk about how do you fight here, I think it's going to work. And whatever you learn, you publish your results, right? And everyone else can discuss and learn from it. Now, we have to, because we talk about the conflict continuum. If we draw this out, we talk about war on that side. This is day-to-day operations. We all like to say war is easy, right? Because in here, you have these defined objectives, and all the forces know how to focus on that. What creates confusion for us is everything short of that. Again, back into this big cloud, we have all four services, and everyone's just going in different directions, just trying to do their best. Why? Because policy is, is not defined. We're not really sure what our objectives are. But what I do know is we have organizations already who are there to help inform policy. Right? So maybe they should focus there and not worry about everything else and help inform policy to help define what our objectives should be. And then we can better organize the force to accomplish these objectives. And again, what does all this mean? Are we redefining what operational prep of the environment means? I don't know. But I think we have the resources and the frameworks and the structure to figure it out. Because we have to learn how to fight as a joint force in cyber. And so we should not make this harder than it already is. All right, so we have four services: the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. Right? And as an example, right, we all have helicopters. Right? Some of us share the similar frames. Some of us don't. Some of us fly similar missions. Some of us don't. That's okay. Right? Don't make this conversation about cyber any harder than it is. Just substitute helicopter and enter cyber. So if you're at the service level, figure out what you need to do in the cyber environment, right, to be successful as a service. Right? Think about when you do exercises, how are you writing your assessments? Right? What results are you trying to validate? And whatever you learn, share them. Right? Because we already have a joint force. Right? So share them among the joint force and what your lessons learned are. And let the joint force then think about then, how do we define doctrine for cyber? Right? How do we support the global combatant commands? And when we're doing joint force operations in cyber, what do we need to do there? But this structure already exists. Right? So if we focus here, if you're at the service level or the joint force level, then stay there. Make assumptions about what other people are doing in order to validate what you're learning. Publish your results, debate it, argue it, right? And whatever that is, just share that information out. But we talked earlier, there's more than just the Department of Defense inside, right, the cyber environment. Right? There's academia, education, right? There's a private industry. And remember, it's not just DoD, right? It's a whole of government. So who else is out here? Is it Department of State? They have a role. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, and so on. So what do all these relationships look like? Now, everyone, I think, is doing their best job they can in this space, but I bet we can gain some efficiency if we just coordinated who's talking to who, so we're not replicating efforts, and we're thinking about how do we gain efficiency to learn more about cyber in this environment. So if one service is working with a university, and another service is working with another university, and they're researching the same subject, how do we just bring them together? Right? How do we organize for information? Because ultimately it comes down to we got to figure this out because we want to defend the homeland. All right, so here's the model from before, and we have all these different actors. And we're trying to figure out how does our structure do this. Now, we prefer the defense in depth model, but we look at this and we're like, this is really hard. But I guarantee if you give this to a company grade officer or an NCO or staff NCO, they'll look at this and they'll say, oh, this looks like the rear area. And if they're in our rear area, right, we need to get them out. That's bad. This looks like the main battle space. And this kind of looks like the security in deep space. So why do we make it harder than this? Right? I think we have a lot of smart people who can kind of figure this out and should. Right? And again, this is just one more model. It's one more framework in order to figure out how to defend the homeland. So all I'm suggesting is that there are a number of frameworks and structures that are out there that already exist to have these conversations. Instead of trying to throw everything into the cyber-vat, right? Let's figure out what the frameworks are, figure out how to have these conversations, and let's organize for intellectual rigor. I think the only thing that we would have to add and consider is how do we just coordinate this information? Who's a coordinating authority for information? Now, if we stand up some structure or some organization or put the pin on somebody, is somebody else going to be disappointed it's not them? Yep. Is everyone not going to play equally? Yep. Is it going to be perfect? Nope. Right? That's okay. But if we organize for intellectual rigor, we have someone who's sharing information, describing the frameworks, who's working where, and sharing results, then hopefully we don't spend another thought generation of 15 years just hoping we stumble into the answer. And let's stop making this harder than it has to be. Because in the end, cyber isn't hard. In fact, cyber, it's so easy, caveman can figure it out.